Hey, welcome guys. So today we are going to be doing the final, well, really all of the weathering stages, but we're going to end with the final product that you see here for our Tamiya Crusader Mark III. Now, what I really wanted to do here was one, cut down in the overall weathering steps, but also the difficulty of weathering a desert vehicle really comes from the fact that all of these colors are going to be relatively the same, right? It's going to be a lot of that sand-based tone, and we don't want the vehicle to end up looking completely washed out, where it's just one color all over the vehicle, no real tone difference. But I also face the challenge of the blue camo is pretty bright, right? And if you really want to go for something historically accurate, I mean, some form of washed out is going to be accurate, right? It's what would have happened to these vehicles is they would have been in that environment and they would have gotten a little bit washed out, especially because they match their colors to the environment. So we want to try to find that balance. And ultimately, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. I did try some things I haven't done before, some products and stuff. So there's a little bit of trial and error, but ultimately I think we got there in the end. So what we're gonna do, we're starting with our panel line wash, and this is Ammo by Migs. It's the wash for DAC vehicles. It's just a dark brown wash. You could easily use a black wash here. I don't really think you would notice a difference, to be honest. I do like this dark brown one just because that dark brown has a little bit more appearance of grime than maybe a black wash does, although the black wash is good too. So we're just going to, I won't show you the whole thing here, but because there's a lot of bolts, but we're going to highlight all these different bolts, uh, all the different, panel lines and kind of cracks and crevices that we find all over the kit here. And we're really going to try to leave it on pretty heavy because again, I knew what I was going to do at the end, which you'll see in 20-30 minutes here, but I wanted to make sure that the details still popped in the end. So we're going to try to do this in a pretty heavy fashion. And it's always good to kind of think ahead in these stages. If you're going to do some really light weathering, you're going to want to go lighter here, right? If you're going to do some heavy weathering, you want everything, kind of all the underneath weathering stages, to be heavier so that they end up, not getting completely washed out in the end. So we're just going to use that nice capillary action. We will get a little bit lazy at points and just paint all the bolts because there's, I don't know, hundreds it feels like on this kit. But nothing our wash can't take care of in a little bit of time. I will let this wash sit overnight. Roughly, we'll call it 24 hours. It might have been like 20. You don't have to technically do it that way. I don't always wait that long to remove them. But I have found if you want it to be heavier, the more that you let the wash set up, the more that, it's going to be difficult to scrape it out of the cracks and crevices. If you were to put enamel thinner immediately on your brush, you know, even 20 minutes from now, you're going to take off what feels like all of that wash. And I've done it plenty of times and then kind of gone back and tried to reset it and everything. So again, patience is key here, even in such a simple early step. You really want to make sure that you're letting it really set up and dry. We're going to go pretty heavy on the wheels, as you can see here, as is pretty customary. There's some nice examples of that capillary action here where that wash is just flowing all around the wheels. Never really get tired of watching that. So in a lot of places, obviously we're using the wash to kind of highlight areas, but I also slap some on, the helmet and some other areas. Just again, this is a two-part wash. The first part is accentuating details. The second part is just getting that first layer of just grime that would be kind of built into the paint at this point. If you ever don't wash your car for a while, you look in the paint, obviously it's like it absorbed the environment around it, right? So that's what this first wash is going to do. And it's why I like to kind of wipe it all over the vehicle. It's not quite, if you do a sludge wash, if you're not familiar with it, you basically just take the wash and you just paint the whole vehicle with it, right? The wash goes everywhere, and it can look great in the end, but it can also be kind of sloppy. This, we have a little bit more control with it. Now, dip the brush in enamel thinner, the odorless thinner that I always use, and start wiping away the wash. I actually went back and I put the wash back on this section that you're seeing now. Even after setting up for 24 hours, the brush was just felt like it was pulling too much wash out. Again, I wanted to leave this really heavy so that it would show through in the end. But you'll see, even with the brush, when you let it set up, see, it's not pulling out of that driver's hatch. It's staying in there. It is pulling it off the rivets a little bit. So we ended up going with the Q-tip. And I think that gives us a much better finish in the end, because it's going to, it's not going to reach into those tighter areas, and it's going to leave us with a lot more wash built up in places. So I put the brush away for this whole process, and I just used the cotton swab, Q-tip, whatever you're familiar calling it. Especially on these areas, it doesn't dig into those panel lines there. And then when you can, of course, as always, try to wipe away with kind of the flow of gravity. And if you can't always do that kind of wiping down, or wiping, down the vehicle like the long way like I am here, you can always go sideways and then just make sure you're kind of finishing your last couple wipes, or in a downward motion, or that kind of elongated motion. You can see that leaves us with some nice, obviously the thinner has stained that a little bit, so it looks like it's a little bit more than it is, but that's leaving us with some nice built up wash back there. And this will take a couple Q-tips. They get destroyed pretty easily around the details. So what I generally try to do is get all of the kind of flat areas, and then at the end kind of come through, and I'll have 4 or 5 dirty Q-tips, and I'll use all of those to kind of do some of those more raised details that I know are kind of going to eat up that Q-tip a little bit. It is a little bit wasteful, but again, I think the finished product is a lot better than what the brush was going to give us. And again, just wiping that down. This is really our first. It's like a base layer of streak and grime. And it's going to give the paints kind of a different tone as well. Now we're going to come in with our tracks wash and just give these tracks a nice layer. Tracks wash goes really well. It's Ammo by Mig's tracks wash. It goes really well with their track paint. Of course, right? Same company. They're going to have kind of the same tone, but You can really, you could use any wash here. You could use that dark brown wash. As you can see, the bottle in the bottom left-hand corner, it's pretty much just a dark brown, little bit of an iron color to it, but nothing too crazy. Now we're going to do chipping. So I use this very, very small brush. That's just the chipping color in the palette there. And we're going to hand chip this entire vehicle. I think it takes a lot more time to do the hand chipping, but it's a lot more controlled, right? You can control really how much is on your brush, where you're putting the chipping marks. And I've never been a fan of sponge chipping, just personally. I've seen other people do it and I think it looks great. Every time I do it, it's too much. I end up not liking it. So we're going to go by hand here and try to get a much more controlled look. And using the side of that brush, not always just the point, but using the side on those raised details is going to give us that really controlled kind of area that we want. And pretty much every time you grab some color, wipe a little bit off on the palette just so you don't have any real buildup on that brush. You want to go as light as possible here and just keep rotating the brush because there will be paint on all sides of it. It's actually pretty interesting. I was doing some research and I think this is kind of one of those things that maybe in the model world that I mean there's a lot of things that we accentuate that aren't necessarily realistic, but I was kind of surprised to find, I guess, the lack of chipping that takes place in these or took place in these vehicles. I don't think it was overly common to see vehicles as chipped as we might make them. So I'm not one for complete realism. I did do the camo pattern that I saw in a video game, but toning it down a little bit is what I was going for. So you see the chipping on those boxes on the side. Again, just around areas that either are raised or would have some, high usage. So those boxes are going to be getting opened all the time. Tools and things are going to be taken in and out of them, smashed against the side. That would probably be the most likely area to be chipped. Kind of where I'm chipping right now. Probably not so much, but it does make the model look good in the end. So, and you do get a lot more control. You could do the hairspray technique like we did in the last kit. I don't know if it was the last kit, but it was the Panzer IV. And that works really, really well. But it's hard to control. Man, this chipping color is just, it's perfect for this paint tone. Kind of wish I used this color on the Panzer IV now, but I wanted to show the gray on that vehicle. So I'm very, very happy with the way it came out. You can see on the back, there's one spot that it got away from me. Maybe I got a little impatient, but we'll cover that up a little bit. And I don't know, maybe it looks good because they would have been stashing all that stowage on the back and things. So there's kind of the final product of chipping there. And I didn't show the wheels, but we do it there as well. And so now we're just really splashing the model. with some of this. It's the XF59, the desert yellow. Can never remember which one's dark yellow and which one's desert yellow because it's XF59 and 60, but it's XF59 that we're using. And we have it pretty thin down, and we're just flicking it on that toothpick. It is, I'd put like 1 drop of white in there, so it is technically slightly lighter than all of the paint that's on there. But what we're trying to do here is just add some chips. You can kind of see I'm really going over the blue areas, at least the majority of the time. But we're just trying to add some kind of like paint level chips, right? Like they didn't go all the way through, but maybe it chipped that camouflage pattern, as you can see there. So I could have done some hand brush chipping on those as well, but I didn't. I did this instead. This is actually a technique that I've not done before, so pretty happy with the way it turned out. And now we're going to do all sorts of streak and grime is what we're starting with here. And that, again, enamel wash. So we're just going to brush that pretty much on every vertical panel, or every vertical surface, I should say. Kind of all over the turret, all over the sides. Everything that would kind of leak down in, you know, a rainstorm or something like that. And then if you did watch the Panzer IV video, you probably heard me talk a lot about the different dust products that we have and how I'm not really a fan of any of them. I recently have acquired this rain mark effect, which, to be honest, is just a watered down dust wash. And I'm 1,000 times happier with this than I am with really any other product that I've bought for doing dust effects. It has a much lighter look to it. It doesn't seem to completely change the tone of the paint. It does a little bit, but all of the other dust products I have feel like they completely stain the paint rather than just changing the color of it in different areas. So very, very happy with that. Now, I put them on together. I think generally what I would have done, you know, any time before in the past, whatever, would be do one, let it dry for a day or two, and then do the next. Doing a little bit of experimenting here, just doing them at the same time. And I did let them dry for a couple, you know, maybe an hour. But very happy with the way they turned out. I wanted them to kind of blend together and just look like dusty grime, and I think we kind of nail that look here. So very, very happy with the way that turned out. And we're just using that kind of feathered brush. And again, just an enamel thinner, just wiping it down. You always have to make sure you don't wipe too much off the top. It's really easy to, you know, with those kind of vertical downward brush strokes, to wipe away everything on the top and leave the buildup in the bottom, which is, you know, more realistic, but you're going to lose out on a lot of that wash on the top. So I generally like to do 1 or 2 passes on the bottom and then kind of work my way up. But see how the wash dries and see how it's wiping, and kind of adapt that way. So now we're going to do a little bit of rust wash here. That is the rust oil washer from Ammo by Mig. We're just going to highlight a couple different areas. Not really any rhyme or reason what we're doing here. Again, I just really wanted a little bit of different tone showing through. all we're gonna do once we get this rust wash kind of into a couple different places, as we always do, we're just going to wet our brush with that odorless thinner and just try to contain it. So you'll want a pretty decent amount of thinner on the brush. You don't want it dripping by any means, but you want to have basically a couple swipes at it where you can, wet it, spread it around a little bit, dry your brush, spread it around, dry your brush, spread it around, dry your brush, and then, maybe get some new thinner at that point. So somewhere in between kind of soaking wet and dry, right? Enough basically to get the wash to flow when you touch it. Now we're going to do a little bit of a fuel stain. You'll see that rust wash is pretty light, right? I didn't want it to be too heavy, but just wanted to try to get some different tones showing through at the bottom. So this was the only area that I was able to find where maybe fuel might be present. Would be on the back, so did some little bit of they did a sloppy job filling the gas tank and made sure to put a nice streak on each side of it. And then we're going to use that same fuel stain to fill out kind of the bolts on the wheels, because those would have been oiled, is my understanding. And that kind of would seep out a little bit as they're driving around and everything like that. So what I've done in the past is tried to go heavier on some wheels and lighter on some. I kind of just did an even job of it this time. I wasn't too concerned with how that would look. But this is a good angle. Well, it was a good angle. You could see those streaking effects and how they look nice and dusty. But now what we're going to do, this is Ammo by MIG. We have washable sand and washable dust. So you could paint these on. I tried airbrushing it and painting it on the bottom of the tank before I really went for it. This is a product I've never used, but that is the look that we're going to go for. And that was actually hand brushed. I hand brushed this paint on, and then you really have to wait like a day, like a full 24 hours before you start removing it. But it's just painted on either with a brush. We did an airbrush in this instance, and I just kind of put both colors all over the tank in a little bit of a random pattern. And then you wet your brush after a day of waiting with some water, and you just wipe it away. Now you will need a paper towel, because you will end up, as you can see, I'm starting to kind of take some of that color and deposit it over there, because you are wiping the color off, at least the raised edges and areas like that. So this is a little bit dangerous, and I had to work a little bit longer than I guess I originally anticipated, because again, I wanted it to look washed out, but not overly so where we lose all of our details, right? But I did want to look like, it had been weathered, and then, hey, they just drove through, a dusty, sandy road and accumulated all this stuff all over it. Ammo also makes a washable white camo, which I have. It came in a pack that I got. I just have not used it, but I was really happy with the way that, again, I've kind of been searching for that dusty alternative, and I don't think that up until this point I had really found anything that really impressed me to any degree. But the washable dust, you still do get a lot of washout, but it ends up looking really, really good, because it builds up in the crevices and the panel lines. And although it does stain the surface of the flat surfaces, it wipes a lot of it away. If for whatever reason you did this and you said, I don't want this look anymore, or it's staining too much, I did find that with a Q-tip, it will pretty much completely remove it from the flat areas. So you could do a lot more cleanup than I did if you wanted to, or if you didn't like the look. So I did end up getting some paint on the tracks, but ultimately this was a little bit of an attempt to make sure that the tracks had a different tone than the tank, to try to make it, again, a little bit less washed out. So I put track wash on it again, and while it's wet here, we're just putting Rebel pigments, and I did it's like track rust. You wouldn't have any rust probably on these tracks, I think, as we all know, but again, I wanted a different tone. Something that, like, I thought this Rebel looked very similar to our kind of dust color. So something to make just the tracks look different. And then we're just going to, this is just a cheap brush that I had. I figured I'm going to stop destroying my nice brushes. By nice brushes, I mean my $2 brushes, and I'm going to buy a pack of 50 for $5 and destroy those instead. So just pushing that pigment into the tracks. We'll let that set. A lot of it ends up coming off. That's why I'm doing it in the box here. I also decided I didn't feel like cleaning up my station this time from all the pigment. And then did a little bit of the track, that track rust pigment on the top as well. Just again, try to get a little bit of a different color present in some areas of the tank here. So you can see the back right of the tank right now. That is how I know that the Q-tip will remove kind of all of that paint. So that washable paint. So I touch that area up just so it doesn't look so stark compared to the rest. But pretty happy with the way that it's kind of washing out. Now, what I would suggest doing, as I kind of try to do with all weathering stages, is start wiping away that wash in some areas and then go on to another area. Let it dry, see how it is. You do have essentially a couple days to work with this washable paint before it's really set up. So you have time to let it dry and to come back and look. And there were, maybe 5 or 6 instances where I said, no, it's still too washed out. It's still too washed out. Before I finally said, okay, that looks good. Right? And I think we got that nice stain in different areas. But it's definitely more built up on the rivets than it is in other places. And we can still see our chipping effects. They're a little bit hard to see on camera, losing the word, the streaking effects and things, but they do show very lightly in person. Maybe not as much as I wanted, but I'm happy with the way that the chipping effect showed through. The rust tones also are very, very light, but I'm happy with that because I've done some rusty looking vehicles in the past, and I didn't need this one to be quite like that. There, you can see some of the streaks are still visible on that side of the turret. So yeah, if you've made it this far, I would please ask you to like and subscribe. We will be building many more kits on this channel. I have a stash of at least 15 armor kits and 5 or 6 aircraft, and can't control myself, so we'll be buying many more. If you have any comments, obviously, please feel free to drop them in the comment section below. And I appreciate you guys watching. I will leave you with this final product for about the final minute here, and we'll see you on the next episode.